All right, everyone, so we're going to go ahead and get started. If I could have the team come and stand up here, that'd be great. So thanks, everyone, for joining us for this workshop. I wanted to first start with introductions. David, you want to start us off?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. My name is David Rojas-Leon. I'm from Colombia. I'm a designer. And what else? What else are we
That's good.
talking about
start with that.
ourselves? That's good.
Hey, everybody. How are y'all doing today? I hope you're great. I'm Julian. I'm Julian Sanjivan. I'm from Malaysia originally. Got my asylum a few years ago. Also, interestingly, I am the director for the New York City Pride March, which is happening in a couple of days. So I'm glad that, this is kind of a leisurely thing that I'm doing, so, just a break. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Hi, everybody. I'm George Ogutu from Kenya. I'm one of the designers of this project, and I hope we will work well with you. You'll hear much more as we go on. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Niurka Melendez Vasquez. I'm from Caracas, Venezuela. I'm an asylum seeker, and I also founder and director of the organization called Venezuelans and Immigrants Aid.
And I'm Sydney Kornegay. I'm also from Colombia, but from Columbia, South Carolina. Not as interesting. And I'm the former director of RDJ Refugee Shelter in New York City, and one of the co-founders and coordinators for this project. So before we sort of launch into what this project was about, we wanted to give just a brief definition of what it means to be an asylum seeker in New York City.
Asylum seeker. An asylum seeker is a person who once is in the country that they want to ask for protection. He asks for, he do all the tramits to start to start with the immigration office in the country they are to ask for protection. Basically, an asylum seeker is, I would like to remark this, please, is not a refugee. It's a big difference between an asylum seeker and a refugee. We, as an asylum seeker, we don't have a clear status while we are waiting for the interview. I think this is a big difference that we have from now on, we have to be aware of.
And just to add to that, one of the main differences between asylum seekers and refugees living in New York City is that an asylum seeker, you're not eligible for any sort of public benefits or any sort of public support until you win your asylum case. And generally, when you come, you aren't able to work for at least 6 months after you first arrive. So you can imagine the specific challenges that causes for people who have just moved to New York City. So with this in mind, this is a group of people who are asylum seekers and allies who wanted to sort of engage in this process of trying to design a better network of sanctuary in New York City. This project kind of originated from my conversations with clients who were living at RDJ Refugee Shelter, all of whom were asylum seekers. And it became very clear that they had some, I think, really insightful insights into what the problems were for asylum seekers in New York, what were some of the solutions. But there were very few, there's no really formal outlets for that kind of feedback to be provided. So we wanted to design a process in which asylum seekers were front and center in service design, and also the ones who were providing feedback and driving the actual design of the project. So we wanted to incorporate design thinking, which I know many of you are aware of, so I won't go too much into detail. But it kind of starts off with this process of empathizing and really trying to understand the challenges and experiences of the people you're designing for. Defining the problem. So this was really trying to zoom in on what are the unique challenges. Based on that, brainstorming solutions, creating a prototype, which we will show to you all today. And with the idea of testing this prototype before we take it into a full-form project. So our event started with a kickoff event at Civic Hall in January, where we met with around 50 asylum seekers, organizations, designers, and technology people to sort of map out the experience of asylum seeking. Then we went into research and interviews. So each of our designers conducted interviews with asylum seekers from their own communities to really focus on the specific challenges. We held a number of participatory workshops. So that's where we tried to kind of group and categorize what are the challenges and what's really the detailed process of interacting with services here in New York City. And then based on that, again, a problem-solving session where we met with asylum seekers, some of whom are in this room, thank you for coming, and who gave their own ideas for how we might improve service provision for asylum seekers in New York City. And then finally, we did move on to prototype testing. And so this is our first round of prototype testing that David will talk more about in detail. And so throughout that, there's obviously a lot of information and a lot of challenges and experiences that we had to synthesize. And we kind of came to two key insights about the challenges facing New York City asylum seekers. And those were lack of relevant, updated, and understandable information, as well as networks which could either support asylum seekers or sort of hold them back. So we want to explore those two insights now with Niurka and with George.
Sorry, I need with this thing. So can you hear me from here, or do I need to use the mic? It's okay for you this way?
I mean, use the mic because...
Yes. So I have to think. Can you help me with this?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. Basically, what we found during our process working with the people from Asylee Designs, I'm part of that people, that is, we found the problem about the lack of information, misinformation, accurate, updated, and centralized information. The process, the resources, the legal changes, what is an asylum seekers, and the scam people that are out there, that are the thing that we want to remark in this presentation. Due to before we become an officially asylum seeker, we don't know if we can apply for that status or that kind of status in the country we are. So we need to find legal consultation. We need to find people who can guide us to realize first if we meet the requirements or fit the requirements that we should have if we want to apply for asylum. So being in this process and noticing this during our workshops and during our activities with asylum seekers, and most important, being an asylum seekers, we know that there is a bunch of organizations that are actually American individuals and institutions that are willing to help us, but sometimes they don't know what exactly an asylum seeker is, or if the services they provide to people fix for our current status as an asylum seekers. So we found that maybe we need a tool, that can guide us, that can help us put all this information together, and for us as an asylum seeker, find a way to just reach that places that are already proved by other asylum seekers or by the people who decided this would be great for asylum seekers, put it in a place. So matching the process with the resources. Why resources? Well, I don't know if I had probably. I'm gonna take this again by saying, we as an asylum seeker, we don't have the status, legal status as a Sidney mentioned before, as a refugee. Why I say this? Because when we come with the refugee status, we have already in this country, putting this country as an example, of course, because we are here. We don't have the social security number, we don't have work permit, we don't have the green card. So that we cannot access in the meantime when we want to resettle, because we are newcomers, we don't have that public assistance that can at least for the first 6 months, help us with the housings, help us with the education, because of the language barrier, or help us with the legal consultation, free legal consultation that we need to know at first our rights. Being an asylum seeker, we have to find our own ways to find housing, find education, and find these kind of basic services. So that we found that there are, as I said before, there are a bunch of government organizations, bunch of non-profit organizations that provide this kind of program and services, but, as I said before, we as an asylum seeker cannot access these kind of services because we don't have the status yet. So there are the scams. I want to let you know that, do you know that out there are organizations that ask you for fee to give you advices, and once you come to them and you say your case or your concerns, they say, sorry, we cannot help you, but still you already pay the fee and they don't return your money? Do you know that there are a bunch of people that they say they are paralegal or they are lawyers, and because we don't know, because we are new in the country, we are trying to apply for this, and then when you pay the fee to apply for asylum, or at least to fill the application, which is free to do so, you go the other day or probably a week after, and then the office is not there anymore, the office is gone, the people is gone. Well, probably we are not discovering the warm water. Probably this happened before, but nowadays, because of the increase of the people that are now asking for asylum in this country, this is happening more and more frequently. So we need a place, we need a tool, we need people that can inform us in advance to be careful of these kind of places, or to avoid to reach these kind of people, individuals or institutions, because of course they are taking advantage of a situation that now is just around the corner, the increase of asylum petitions. About the legal changes, this is important to remark in this slide, because putting as an example this year, 2018, yes, there have been two big announcements for us as an asylum seekers that has made change our priorities. As Sydney said when she had in her intervention, we are starting in January. When we start to put everything on the table, and we start to just, by our own experience, saying what are our priorities when we are new in this country, we say, well, housing, job, education, we need a place where to learn the language, and so on. Nowadays, because in February, at the end of February, March, they announce, when I say they, I'm talking about the USCIS, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Office. They changed the way to start to set the appointments. So now, the person who last submit the application for asylum is going to be called first. For instance, me, I applied for for asylum in February 2016. I'm still waiting for my interview, but there are many cases, I know, not just in my community, the Venezuelan diaspora community, but others community, that they just submit their application a month ago, and they already have set the appointment, the first appointment with the immigration officer. What that means is that now we have to change our priorities. How? Well, we need to find resources for interpreters to be with us in that interview, and we need to find immediately legal consultation assistant, because before we decided to become an asylum seeker, we need to be that secure, that guarantee that not that our asylum case is going to be granted, but at least a good statement, or at least somebody who can be with us there in case, because it's going to be sooner, in case we cannot communicate ourselves in the language, in this case in English. So knowing that, again, we need a tool or a platform where to just put updated, centralized, and trustable information regarding, in this case, to the legal changes. Knowing that now, I want to put our own example as a regular citizens, as an asylum seekers, as an example, I say it again, that this is possible to do it. Why? Because we have been doing the same for our community by our own, with our resources, just with the willing to help, because we are passing the same process. So if we find probably a platform where we can reach more people, when we can create more awareness, not just for people, but organizations to join us, probably open their current programs and services to the people who are in this kind of limbo status. We can reach more people, we can empower more people, and we can educate, because that is another key that we must put on the table now by saying we need to educate people, we need to educate our own community as an asylum seeker by saying, hey, do you know that being an asylum seeker means this kind of status, which I call limbo, with a pending status? If you see carefully the laws here, the immigration laws here, there is no legal status. Pending is a no status. But it's the status they call us when we receive the notice. So, and doing the same for the organization and American individuals that are willing to help us, that will be always, from our point of view, the key to make this tool, to make this platform a really successful. And of course, empower people will make us reach more in case I don't have access to this kind of platform, in case I don't have access to Venezuelans and immigrants aid, for instance. Still, I know someone who knows, because somebody else before informed these people. So basically, this is our first problem we found. Thank you.
Okay, based on what my fellow has properly articulated on the problems, we felt that what is most lacking is networking. And we feel that we need to come up with a network which is very positive, very helpful, and very humane. From our research, what we did, we discovered that there are networks around New York City. Some are good, some are bad. And our main aim is to come up with the networks which can positively help asylum seekers. Like we have the social organizations, we have the religious organizations, Friends, Americans, supporters, migrant groups in various boroughs. Some families come up and help. People back somewhere at home to help us come to get these resources. Because in most cases what we discovered was that people don't know that there's even pro bono lawyers. They use the little money they get to hire lawyers. There are cases where people are, some networks even discourage you from applying for asylum. They say, your case, there's nothing we're going to do. Please, you just work and save money. Meanwhile, you know that you are illegally staying in USA. So our main purpose here with the Asylee Design is to come up with positive networks. And I know even in this room, we have people who have networks from maybe the church groups, non-profits, individuals who come together. Actually, what asylum seekers need most is not really the money or the support, or money support, or financial support. There are times need spiritual. There are times need just you getting some time with them and talk to them. I have a case in point of a group who invited, and they have been inviting me several times. And they make me also invite others, where they just say, okay, we want to help you to get resources. Maybe get some scholarships. Maybe we help you develop your CV. Those are the networks we want. And we really want to have a database for those networks. Any one of you who has such a network, please help us get this network for us so that we can give it to the different asylum seekers. So purely the asylums, our work, which we want to do as the first my colleague talked, what we have found lacking most is the networking. People don't know where to go. They don't know. And if they get, at times they get people who are not helping them at all. People want to swindle. We have several scammers. We have people, I know, I was so mad when I got a story where there are people who advertise 2 posts and they say we have a lot of housekeeping jobs and they collect $100 for even 100 people. That's $10,000. And then they give only 1 job. So we are trying to come up with a tool where we'll identify some of bridge builders who can positively say, okay, we know this. This is something which an asylum seeker who has not got this status can do. So please, in case any one of you has a network of such, which is positive and can help us, let us have it in our database so that we can help our asylum seekers.
So I think just to synthesize and summarize what both Niurka and George said, is that there's this big gap of information. People don't know where to find resources, which lawyers to trust, which organizations to trust, and there's a lot of mistrust of those different formal resources. There's not really a good information source for where you go to get updated information once laws change, because you might have received good advice from your lawyer a month ago, but now that good advice is bad advice based on legal changes. So there's a need for updated, trustable information, but that updated and trustable information has to be combined with some sort of personal connection to a network, because if not, it's easy to get lost in the system. So having individuals, having groups that can sort of accompany asylum seekers through this process is really important. So one of the questions that our sort of design question that we came up with is how might we design a tool that will empower asylum seekers to actively share accurate, up-to-date information with each other so that they serve as a network of support with one another.
Thank you, Sydney, for explaining that, and also George for elaborating on the networks. So based on everything that Sydney talked about, introducing the project, and also Niurka explaining a little bit about what the research or the outcome of the focus groups were, and how asylum seekers were accessing information through the different networks and support systems, we identified what the gaps were and how people were accessing that information. Now, using using that information, we developed a solution. And that solution was specifically called Bridge Builders. So let me elaborate a little bit how this works. And again, keeping in mind, this came about based on the outcome of the focus group and all the information gathering through their interviews that we also had. So let's focus on 2 areas. First, the Rolodex of information, because that's closely connected to the Bridge Builders. So the Rolodex of information is basically a Rolodex of information with a variety of all information that George talked about, the network, all of the different networks that we get. So we want to be able to build that up, have that. The 2 key factors, and this is something Niurka touched on, reliability of information, the accuracy of information, because there are a lot of potential scammers out there. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that the asylum seekers community is pretty vulnerable. There's a lot of desperation because they want to survive. And I personally went through that as well. So when I first came here in this country, I wanted to survive because I was not able to work just yet. I was not able to apply for employment work permit just yet. So it took a few months. So of course I needed to figure out how to survive. And so I was desperate for a job, and I came upon this opportunity online. They said, you will have to pay $200. We would place you in an administrative job. And so I blindly paid that $200 because, again, I was wanting to survive. The next day I was asked to come back, showed up at this place, they were gone. Completely shut down. And this office was in Midtown Manhattan, right next to KPMG. So it's amazing, beautiful, it's on the 34th floor. So, I fell for it. And I should have been more careful. But again, this is why I want to make sure the Rolodex of information is reliable, it's accurate, and it's up to date. Second to that, we want to use bridge builders. The bridge builders specifically would be either volunteers or paid staff. Now, what's important here to keep in mind is the connection that the bridge builders would have with the asylum seekers that we want to work with. Again, going back to what George said, it's familiarity. You know, a lot of asylum seekers depend on people within the community because they are familiar with them. So that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we tap on that, hire people who are asylum seekers or asylees, and maybe volunteers. But that doesn't mean that we're going to discount people who are passionate. There could be a lot of people who are passionate about immigration issues or asylees, asylum seekers. So we'll work together. Now, those two will go hand in hand, and of course, expanding a formal and informal support system. With all of that, given this will be a short-term project, hopefully it will develop into something bigger, we hope to have a lot of data. And we all know how valuable data is in today's world. So that data will come in handy for advocacy work. There's a lot of advocacy initiatives that we need to make to create a lot of change. And we'll be able to tap on all of the resources through the advocacy, through the data that we'd be able to get out of the work that we'll be doing. Of course, that's a long-term plan. But again, important to keep in mind the human part of this, the human connection that we'll have, because people will trust each other a little bit more if they are from the community. So that's something I wanted to emphasize. So it's also important to understand this because this is how we develop a prototype, which David is going to talk about.
Sure. So as Sydney mentioned before, we are running, or we are based on a human-centered design and design thinking process, meaning that we want to put something out there based on the work that we have been going through. I also want to point out that this prototype and the result of, this what we are presenting right now is not only something that the five of us came out with. This has been the work of many, many people who we are very thankful, asylum seekers and asylees who have been very generous in terms of sharing their experiences and working in team to sort of come out with what we have right now. So as a manifestation of what we call the Rolodex, and as something that we can build to provide bridge builders with and asylum seekers themselves with, we prototype this sort of set of tools. They are very basic prototypes, but maybe if someone is a designer here, you know that the value of a prototype is not what it looks like or how it feels in terms of aesthetics, but the interaction that it invites and the conversations that they create. So one of the first prototype, which is a wireframe, pretty much, is a website. We have a wireframe without content, but with main features that we want to test out and use. Actually, I can show you the wireframe that we have. So I'll go through pretty quickly. The idea is that this tool will be usable or useful for people who are still back in their home countries and they are making the decision on whether or not to come to the U.S. and specifically to New York as asylum seekers, because that is a decision that lacks information, as we know. Like, it's really hard to make that decision without knowing what it means, without knowing if you actually qualify for the status, without knowing what the process requires. Also, knowing that this city it's one of the cities in America that is open to everyone, but also can imply an important cultural shock. And it's very, although for some people might be easy to learn how to navigate at first, it requires a process to everyone who's coming in any, even from people from other cities in the country. Also, the second phase is how to, are you arriving soon, what you need to know in order to come to the city. And also something that we that we consider and is the fact that people who are already in the country and already in the city with tourist visa, job visa, working visa, student, they can eventually consider becoming asylees. Something else that I forgot to mention, a couple of things. Language is important for us to be able to communicate in the language of preference of our users. And this logging, because as we want to guarantee the safety and accurateness, is that a word?
Accuracy.
Accuracy of the information that we provide. Some contents are sensitive, so people should be able to, there should be a filter. Pretty quickly, when you're still in hometown, what is asylee status, how to get to the US, what is life in New York, and then we want to introduce this, which is very important for us to include, which is when you talk about a website, it feels cold and like, I don't know, like distant. So we want to bring back the human nuances and the human side of it by first including tips from peers that are like, this is all based on good faith. So if you know that someone who has gone through the process or who is embedded in the whole process because there are service providers or experts, you will hear to them and you will feel that that is trustable. And also like an idea of having a chat with someone on the other side of the screen that listens to you and create some sort of safe space for you to ask questions. Then, if you're arriving soon, if you decided that you want to come to New York City, the first piece of, or the first thing that you might need to do is finding a bridge builder, someone who is here that can like hold your hand pretty much, or be there for you to understand what the whole process again. Some people coming here come by themselves or with their families without knowing anyone. So even once again, I'm not an asylum seeker, and I came as a student at first, and even knowing people here, if they haven't, I mean, the experiences are very different, and they can have like the best willingness to help you, but if you are not going through the same set of situations, they won't really help you. Then learning the language is important. Some people might come with different levels of fluency, and once again, how to navigate the city. And once you are in New York, once again, if you are here and you decide to be an asylum seeker, you still need someone that will help you out with the whole process. You might still need to learn the language. And these are like sections of things, let's say like goals or basic needs that you will have to achieve as you are in the city. First, find housing. As Julian, George, and Niurka mentioned, there is a lot of scammers out there willing to take your money, and you need, and also there's different situations that people go through. Some people can come to live with their friends. Some people will need shelter. Some other people might come with a little bit more of money so they can like find temporary housing. But all of these options are very overwhelming at first. Navigate the city, legal services, which is a huge component. once again, swindlers out there, people in need of interpreters, people in need of understanding what the legal terminology is, especially as is changing as we speak. Also knowing that, as George mentioned, maybe you will need a pro bono lawyer that you are entitled to use, and you don't know that there exists. Then job hunting, knowing that there are some gaps and like in between phases where when you might have or not have a permit to work. Services map, which I'll show later. This idea of wellness and health, because as people go through the whole process, experience, of course, distress. You're in the middle of constant uncertainty that undermines your wellness and your spirit and your emotional health. And this idea of financial wisdom, which once again speaks to how to wisely allocate your money, since probably you don't have, it varies, but you need to know how to use your money in some cases. So this is an idea of how to find a bridge builder. Individuals and organizations, something like a directory with faces, and you will know their name, their background, the languages they speak, their gender, and organizations that are out there. Being able to rate services that you already experience, and knowing from other people who already went there and had some sort of experience. This sort of alert or putting out there those scammers or those services that you should avoid based on some other people's experiences, and how that is located on a map that you can navigate. Once again, this idea of the human side, and you can also contribute to that. You can also provide your tips. You can also, as you make progress, become a bridge builder, talk with, guide your peers who are going through a similar process. And we have this idea of a service certification. I don't love using the word certification because it implies a lot of norms and requirements, but it is to somehow provide services and individuals providing services with a label or something that identifies them as trustable and accurate for asylum seekers. And of course, how to become a bridge builder. So we will be designing a more defined program for to sort of formalize this role of a bridge builder with training, with these tools, and the incentive program that we define. So this as for the website. Going back to this, we also have a toolkit that we have it here. And this is just a manifestation that we want to put up there to see how it works. The idea is to provide this briefcase or this toolkit that asylum seekers will receive once they come to the city through bridge builders or service providers, or if they are here and they decide to seek for asylum. So quickly, it includes, and I like to pass this around, a guide, which includes more sort of static information that is sort of the same over time. So once again, this doesn't have content, but there's like a structure here. This metaphor of a passport, which is like a journal and workbook. So You can include information about your network of bridge builders, what to do, like a checklist and to-do list for each goal that you want to shift, and this idea of like having a stamp or a label once you shift something, and a section where you can draft a tip that you want to share or you want to reflect on your experience that you eventually want to share with other people, and a print version of the service map that you can also intervene and use as you prefer. So we are passing this around for you guys to take a look at it. And also we'll be distributing these forms because we want to know what you think. So these forms include this section asking you any additional feature functionality or suggestions for the website, as well, like if you think that something else should be included or removed from this toolkit, any other idea that you have, and your information. Of course, you don't have to, feel free to fill out whatever you want. You don't have to fill it out completely. If you do, we'll appreciate that. But yeah, it's pretty much up to you. And this idea of the certification label. So we are defining the criteria behind this certification, how to deliver the label and how to maintain it. And so the question now is, what is next? This is a proposed timeline. The first part is for the tools creation. So we are anticipating 2 months of content creation and translation. From that, finalizing the design, then testing out the pilot, designing the pilot and testing out the pilot and finalizing the products, then production and launching these tools. And as we do that, we also have to create the Bridge Builder program. So we'll need funding. If you are funders, talk to us. So defining the program, recruiting, training, and launching along with the tools. So as this session was called a dialogue, so this is the time for us to dialogue. So if you have comments, questions, suggestions, anything that is in your mind, this is the time to do so. So anything?
Thank you. Question. When an asylum seeker comes to the city, how do they go about finding about your organization or knowing where to go, basically? I mean, how do they get informed of where they need to go to get the right help?
I think that's a great question. I think the bridge builders play a huge role in this, and the idea is to have a bridge builder kind of placed in communities. So have a Venezuelan bridge builder, have a Honduran bridge builder, have people who are connected in those communities and who are actively trying to reach out to and connect with newcomers. Because right now, information sharing is static. Asylum seekers have to come and find the right people. So the idea would be that these community organizers essentially are proactively looking for and reaching out to them. And so we're thinking that would be combined with publicizing on those nice new electronic things around New York City. So digital advertising, as well as hoping to find some way to place something at ports of entry. But that's going to look a long term. But you guys feel free to jump in on that too.
I think it's also important to understand that there are a lot of service providers that are already, available out there that constantly get in touch or in touch with asylum seekers. And that's one of the jobs of the bridge builders too, because they will be working very closely, and that's also what the function of the Rolodex is. So that also helps funnel people into this to be able to provide that support, in addition to what Sydney has already mentioned.
And I also would like to add that based on our experience with our organized movement, Venezuelans and Immigrants Aid, the way we have found easier to spread the word is using the same organization that already help us as an asylum seekers. For instance, putting my personal example, I know different organizations that helps few of them asylum seekers specifically, but others help just immigrants in general. So I let them know what we are doing as a Venezuelans, so they always call me or send people along to us by saying, well, Niurka, I met this Venezuelan, so you can help him. So this is, I think, at first, an easy way to reach people, because somehow they try putting, again, sorry, my personal example, we try to look at our community. We try to look in where are the Venezuelan, or is one Venezuelan who can help me, and probably he doesn't know the right answer, but he knows an organization. And might be a good way to spread the word by just let the organization know about this idea, this tool. This might be a good way just to spray quick and
just to emphasize on that, we'd want to widen the network so much so that in case of any asylum seeker coming into New York City, whoever you get at least must have some little information from those networks. So that whenever you land into maybe an organization or a non-profit which cannot help you, then they can easily refer you to us, and then we make the coordination as much easier as possible.
Hi, so my name is Maria from Reef Asylum Support. So first of all, I want to congratulate you for this really fantastic initiative. It's absolutely not only very important, but very much needed. There is such, not only, there's really, as Niurka was mentioning, there has been and still remains a huge void of resources available for asylum seekers, and hopefully, after, as we know now, there is some awareness that there is really a huge asylum crisis at our border, but it has been happening in our cities for many, many years. And with the type of government that we have, it is even more timely. So first, thank you to really think of this kind of networking, because that's the only solution, is to be working as a network, as coalition, and the more, the better. I also want to really emphasize what George was saying, is that the human connection is really important, because there is a lot of information. There is information, but it is how to navigate this information that is the key factor. We know it because we have a website with all kinds of resources. Doesn't mean that people are using it, or even if they read it. Also, I'm going to talk as a lady who has gray hair, and as Julian is afraid of competitors, of chatting, and and thanks God, we know that since the past 10 years, we've seen it among the asylum seekers that have been reaching us. The fact that people can reach us through social media, through website, has really made our work easier in terms of outreaching, to people who need the services. But there's a lot of people, and I include myself, who don't know how to use that system. And, whether they're old or young, I was in Buenos Aires on Christmas trying to book a tour with the Pope, to visit where the Pope lived. And it was the first time I used chat. I was so scared. I thought the lady was trying to get my money. So imagine that people who are coming very scared already, not knowing the language, how they're going to trust. And then my other question I have for you, what is going to be the training of the bridge builder, which is very important, especially if they are decentralized and from the commune, from the different communities. Also, we also need to talk about that because there is distrust among communities for some different reasons. Is how much will they know? How much will they, what kind of a training? Are they going to feel overwhelmed? I know that because people come and they say, I need a lawyer right now. And we understand they need a lawyer, but the problem is that there's not enough pro bono lawyers in the city. And we had also housing, so people feel overwhelmed. So we have to really, I would say, really think that, and we'll be happy to work with you and brainstorm together, because you don't want to burn out the poor bridge builders. That's one thing. And then my suggestion also is to think of working with local medias, neighborhood medias. I personally live in Estonia. There's many, and maybe also fundraise to use to work in partnership, with local newspapers, local radios, because they are still very much. I mean, they play a really important role in terms of spreading the information. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody wants to?
So I guess an answer to how are we going to train the bridge builders. So we're going to obviously consult with Reef. You're going to be in charge of developing the training, Maria. No, I think that's definitely like a next stage thing that we want to be thinking about, and that would happen hopefully in partnership with those certified organizations who deal with the reality of working with asylum seekers every day. And I think the neat part of the prototyping idea is that rather than building out this huge project and then launching it and hoping it works, is that you get to test it in little stages along the way. And so I think with the Bridge Builder program, that would be something we would start very small with, see how it goes, get feedback, learn from it, before we try and roll that out as a large decentralized operation.
That's also one of the reasons why we wanted to have a couple of them be paid, because we felt like, we can rely on volunteers, but we also understand volunteers do have limitation in what they can do and what they can't do. So the idea was to also have paid bridge builders. In addition to that, we'll have volunteers. I think it's important to keep in mind as well, because a lot of this is going to be community initiative. So a lot of them would already have specific connections. So that's what we'll need to leverage on. And again, we are not providing that service, like specifically housing or legal. It will be a lot of youth service providers who would be here. So our job is really to try and connect people to you. And so that's where the bridge builders would be important. And I think I have to emphasize what Sydney just said. This is a small project, and we are starting out. I think there's potential. I personally believe in this. I'm very passionate about this. But I think we want to start small and slowly work and expand.
And I want to add, again, I'm sorry if I put myself, our organized move as an example, but it's a good practice. I think we have to take at least a few tips. What makes BIA really special is we don't have resources, as we said. As I said before, we are all asylum seekers, and we use the resilience that comes because we are human beings. We use that things. We use the trust. People trust us because we are asylum seekers, as they are. So based on that, when we base our actions in trust, when we base our actions in human feelings, such as resilience, of course we are gonna get the best from human beings. So we don't ask to ask. In our case, we don't ask people to spread the word. Sometimes we do so, but mostly we don't do. They just consider themselves part of this organized movement, as they are, and they just start to do everything by their own. Which is, I think, when we show faces, when we show that we don't want anything but help, just everything comes out along, I guess.
One small thing to the point of like website versus other options. We are considering like the different different situations of each asylum seeker. As an example of that, this briefcase or print, like physical toolkit might be an analogy or an option for people who are not tech savvy or they don't have internet and they don't have internet access at first when they arrive. Or so this is to say that we are trying to consider all the factors that affect asylum seekers at first and provide something in response. But of course, with a human factor behind it or in front of it. But yeah, we are considering like all those different situations.
Just to address what she said about the mistrust, our aim is to identify bridge builders who have really have the knowledge of the communities. And they have, first of all, they have to prove to us that they have the trust of their communities where they stay in. So that when we really take them as volunteers or paid up bridge builders, they have to indicate to us that they are able to mobilize their communities. And they don't interfere with the other, the other communities.
I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions, and then.
Okay. Yeah, I really want to appreciate you for this program. I thank you for what you're doing. I think is a very good opportunity for so many people like myself. And since I have been to this organization, I know I have learned a lot, and I'm still learning more. But I just want to add something to what she said about the awareness. A lot of people are still out there. They still don't have the opportunity to get this information. Yes, the media, like on tele, video, the radio, but I think the quickest means to get to these people is with the flyers. Like just getting a flyer and just make it very simple, and for people to know, just for them to get the contact on who to call or talk to. Then maybe you book an appointment with the person. If you just have the flyer, like we are all here right now, a lot of people that had opportunity to get some of the flyers, go to your places, like some of us could be in the shelter, depending on where you live, you have opportunity to just drop it right in the desk, or you have some organizations too that you attend and you want people to get informed, you can just drop the flyers and people pick it up. When you get there, they just go through it, and if they don't need it, someone need it, they can just pick it up and give to the person that need it. That will make it faster, because some people don't really use the media. They don't have time. Some people don't have time to do that. But while some people have time, but they don't really have time to even go through to that area. They have, other places they can go to when dealing with their whatever. So I think the quickest means is with the flyers, so it can go around. Like if we had an opportunity, I would have been happy to get it and just distribute it. Even as I'm going, I can just give it out. So I think that would be a bit better.
Thanks for that idea.
Yeah.
I just
wanted to quickly add something.
She actually had her hands up for a while. Yeah, I think.
Also, I know that we have a new session coming in here soon, so after this, we will move outside, but please feel free to continue talking to us. Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Thank you. My name is Natasha Johnson. I'm a professor and attorney, a gender-based violence activist, and an artist. And so I'm wondering, I'm currently working on a project that works on behalf of people in New York who experience female genital cutting. And I've been thinking about trying to generate something similar to this. So I know that this is still very new in its inception, but I'm curious about what the challenges have been so far as you've seen them and how you've been able to address them. And then what have been the successes so far, and how did you sort of plan for either of those two?
Sure. So I think obviously every challenge to every sort of startup project is initial funding. I think especially with asylum seekers, people are super chaotic. All of our designers have tons of other communities and initiatives they're involved in. So doing that kind of organizing takes a lot of time. It's a slow process. And it's also an emotional process. And asking people to share information, even if you say don't share anything too personal or that you're not comfortable with, sharing that kind of information and experiences can be very emotional. And so planning for how do you frame each interview, how do you frame each focus group to make sure that people are aware of kind of the boundaries and are comfortable and know what they should share has been important. And I think something that was really important to us, there's lots of tech and design resources out there. And when we at our launch event, we had like 20 or 30 startup designers, coders come up and say, hey, you should try this idea. And like it's all really cool and exciting, but we really wanted this idea to come from Asylum community themselves and not from a bunch of coders, which are great and useful and we'll hopefully be using their services later. But I think kind of isolating the process at first and making sure it was very community-based and not from outside.
Yeah, something quick to add. I think there's, since you can, like, people going through this process could be damaged or could be, there could be some sort of negative impact. There's like some sort of concern about being very detailed and go through a whole accurate research process. But I think, and for some designers, like you can get stuck there and you might be afraid of move forward and put something out there. I think putting something out there, even if you don't know all the answers, is important because that also will inform you and will help you making progress in whatever you want to do. So I think like breaking that, I mean, not to forget about those factors, but to understand that putting something out there and testing out is part of that process. It's not something that comes after.
You also asked about successes. So I know they talked a lot about the whole challenges that we faced, but I think one of the key successes, we're all standing right in front of you, you can see how intersectional and how diverse we are. And that has been a huge strength for us because as many of you have pointed out, it's a lot about trust and human connection. And to get something like this up, the whole startup of this we needed to gain trust from people to share that information. And because we represent different types of communities, we were able to bring a whole lot of different views to this. And that's how we came up with a more holistic suggestion and ideas and challenges that came up with this prototype. And I think that's really interesting and that's important to also highlight.
Sadly. Thank you all so much for being here. Please, if you have more ideas or want to give us feedback to those forums, we'll be outside in the hall hanging out. So, please, this part.